Hi boys and girls, welcome back. Today I'm going to read a story about the Statue of Liberty. Always found that so interesting. But I have a riddle about the Statue of Liberty. Why was the Statue of Liberty ahead of her time? Okay. This book is called Her Left Foot. It's by Dave Eggers and Sean Harris. If you've heard of France, you may have heard of the French. They are people that lived there. You may have also heard of something called the Statue of Liberty. Did you know the Statue of Liberty comes from France? This is a factual book. It means it's nonfiction, it's true. One day, a Frenchman named Edouard de la Boule had an idea. The idea was to celebrate 100 years the United States of America had been around by giving them a giant sculpture. So he convinced another Frenchman, a Frenchman with an Italian last name, to design a sculpture. The artist's name was Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Bartholdi designed the statue. I love the illustrations, especially the dog at the table. He first made very small models of the sculpture, then larger ones, and finally the ones we know, which stands 305 feet above the water. The final full-size version was covered with a thin copper skin. The skin is about as thick as 2 pennies. You know what? That's not very thick. Here is a rendering of Bartholdi and his team. He had a team. He did not work alone. He did not like working alone. They're constructing the statue's hand. Notice the hand is bigger than these men. Thus, they made a statue in many parts. So here, they're just working on the hand. Wow, it's very big. These parts were assembled in New York City. So they had to send it to New York City because that's where the Statue of Liberty is. And put it together or assemble it. No, wait. First they were assembled in Paris. Did you know this? Ask your friends and even your teachers if they knew that before the Statue of Liberty was assembled in New York, she was first constructed in Paris. Your friends and teachers will be astounded. They'll be impressed. They might think you're fibbing. But you're not fibbing. It really happened. The Statue of Liberty stood there above Paris for almost a year. So look, here's a picture of the Statue of Liberty in Paris. It was built there, then taken apart. After they assembled the statue in Paris, they took it apart. But we just put it together, the workers said. This is absurd, they said. They said this in French, the language of the French, the people who appreciate the absurd. I like how they have the feet and the crown together. In 1885, after they took it apart, they put the parts in 214 crates and put these crates on a boat. The boat was called the Isere. Sorry for the interruption. The boat was called the Isere. The boat traveled over the Atlantic Ocean and made its way to a city called New York, which is also in a state called New York. Hundreds of workers, perhaps 214 of them, took the pieces out of 214 boxes, then began to rivet the pieces together. Assembling the statue took 17 months. And it all happened on what was then called Bedloe's Island. It's not called that anymore. Bartholdi liked to see the sculpture rise above the harbor. Sometimes he watched the construction from the water. Sometimes he watched from the land. Usually he was wearing a sturdy black hat, for he, like most European men of the time, favored sturdy black hats. So he's watching it being built. You have noticed by now many of the pictures of the Statue of Liberty in this book have colored her brown. You may have thought the illustrator of this book was not so good at his job because we all know the Statue of Liberty to be a certain greenish blue, but the Statue of Liberty was made of copper. And copper starts out brown, then very slowly, when left outside for long periods of time, copper will eventually oxidize. And when it does, it turns this blue-green color. So it starts out this color and ends up that color. So the Statue of Liberty that everyone in New York saw being constructed was actually brown. The Statue of Liberty, in fact, was brown for about 35 years. The statue turned green around 1920, and it has been this color ever since. Perhaps you already know this. And you may have known the book the statue is carrying. The one in her left hand features the date, July 4th, 1776, on which the Declaration of Independence was signed. The book or tablet. And you may know the 7 spikes on her crown represent the 7 seas of the earth and the 7 continents and the sun's rays too. And you probably know the torch she carries is a symbol of enlightenment, lighting a path to liberty and freedom. And you might have known that at one point Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb and the record player, once proposed to have a giant record player inside the Statue of Liberty. He did. He wanted the statue to be able to speak. In the end, though, this idea was considered a bit strange and wasn't pursued. Yeah, that would be weird. A giant statue talking. And did you know the interior of the statue was designed by another Frenchman by the name of Eiffel? That's right, the same Eiffel who a few years later would design the Eiffel Tower. And did you know that while the statue was first being constructed in Paris, a bunch of Parisians, mostly writers, they like to eat, actually dined in the area just below the statue's knee? This too is true. While the statue was rising, Bartholdi set up lunch 4 stories up to impress and enthrall these French writers, who were difficult to impress and enthrall. They were at least mildly amused. See how high up there? But there's one thing you might not know, and this is the central point of this book, a point the author apologizes for taking so long to get to. The point is, even if you've seen a picture of the Statue of Liberty, or many pictures of the Statue of Liberty, or even hundreds of pictures of the Statue of Liberty, you probably haven't seen pictures of her feet. Wonder why that is. And probably, if you have seen pictures of her feet, you probably have not seen pictures of the back of her feet, in particular, her right foot. What do you notice when you see this picture? What do you notice? That's her foot. What do you notice about it? Another picture of it. Whoa, it's so big. That's right. She is going somewhere. She is on the move. That's why her foot was lifted up. It wasn't flat. Let's pause and collect ourselves and think about this. Let's discuss this. Let's think and discuss the fact that this is the largest sculpture in all the land and most iconic symbol of the United States of America. Let's talk about the fact that the statue has welcomed millions of visitors and immigrants to the United States. People talk about her unusual headwear. They talk about her gown, which seems a very heavy kind of garment. and would likely result in serious lower back issues. They talk about her beautiful torch and the severe look on her face. But no one talks about the fact that she is walking. A 150-foot woman on the go. Every time we see the Statue of Liberty in pictures, or anytime we imagine the Statue of Liberty, we see her standing still. Very still, like, whoa, a statue. But she's moving. She weighs over 450,000 pounds and wears a size 879 shoe. And she is moving. How can we have missed this? Or even if we saw this and noticed this, how is this we have seen and noticed a 450,000 pound human on her way somewhere and said just another 150-foot woman walking off a 150-foot pedestal? And the most important thing, where is she going? Is she going to Soho to get a panini? That's in New York. Is she going to the West Village to look for vintage Nico records? No, she's facing southwest. So she's facing New Jersey. Could she be going to Trenton? Wait, no, she's facing southeast. She's not going to New Jersey, but she's going somewhere. But where? Why is she moving? There are certain things we know. We know that around her feet are chains. They are broken chains, implying that she has freed herself from bondage. We know that Bartholdi wanted us to know this. He wanted us to see the chains. People have talked about the chains. But few talk about the foot that is so obviously in mid-stride, about the fact that her entire right leg is in mid-stride. What does this mean? What does it mean? We often forget about this right foot, this right leg. Here's an idea. Here's a theory. Here's a reminder. If the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of freedom, if the Statue of Liberty has welcomed millions of immigrants to the United States, then how can she stand still? Welcome to the United States of America. Liberty and freedom from oppression are not things you get or grant by standing around like some kind of statue. No, these things require action, courage, and a willingness to rest. The Statue of Liberty was not built to welcome just 1,886 immigrants from Italy on one certain Sunday in, say, 1886. No, she was built to welcome 3,000 immigrants from Poland the next day. The next day, 5,000 Norwegians on that boat. After that, 10,000 Glaswegians, the Cambodians, the Estonians, Somalis, Nepalis, Syrians, Libyans. It never ends. It cannot end. After all, the Statue of Liberty is an immigrant too. And this is why she's moving. That's why she's striding. In welcoming the poor, the tired, the struggling to breathe free. She is not content to wait. She must meet them in the sea. Emma Lazarus wrote the poem to raise money for the construction of the pedestal the Statue of Liberty stands on. Now the poem is engraved and posted on the Statue of Liberty National Monument. I'll read you the poem. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name is Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she. With silent lips, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest toast to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And that's what's at the bottom. Interesting story about the Statue of Liberty. So we'll get back to our riddle. Why was the Statue of Liberty ahead of her time? And I'm going to have to get a picture to show you. Here she is. Because she's holding a tablet. It's not a real tablet, but it's like a tablet of paper. Kind of fun. I miss you. I love you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.